Wow, you've sent over a ton of articles and research lately, and it's really interesting stuff. One thing that really jumps out is this whole idea that everyone seems to be feeling,
Completely swamped.
right, like chronic stress, fatigue,
Yeah.
that sense of being overwhelmed. It's like a 21st century epidemic or
It
something.
really is.
And it's pretty clear you want to really understand this. You want to cut through all the noise and figure out what really matters.
Exactly.
So that's what we're going to do in this deep dive. We're going to pull out the most important insights from what you sent about chronic stress and all its crazy effects. We'll break it all down
Oh,
in a way that hopefully makes sense. You don't need a medical degree to follow along.
I think you'll be surprised how much of this resonates
Yeah.
with your own experience. I mean, as you were going through all that material, I wouldn't be surprised if you had a few aha moments.
Right.
I mean, think about it. You know that bone-deep tiredness that never seems to go away, no matter how much sleep you get, or the brain fog that makes it hard to focus. And then there's that edgy, irritable feeling where everything just seems to bug you. Yeah, those are classic signs of chronic stress. But what's really fascinating, and what your sources dug into, is how all of this is tied to some pretty major changes in your body, down at a fundamental level.
Okay, so let's break this down. One of the biggest things that kept popping up was the effect of chronic stress on our hormones. It's like everything starts there and just spirals outward.
It really is a cascade effect. You know, you can think of your body's stress response as a really sophisticated alarm system. It's designed to handle those short bursts of, fight or flight energy. So when there's a perceived threat, boom, adrenaline, cortisol, aldosterone, all these hormones surge to get you ready to act. But the problem is, what happens when that alarm keeps going off?
Right, like the smoke detector stuck on high alert, even though you just kind of, slightly burnt the toast.
Exactly. And your sources make it clear that this constant state of high alert really throws a wrench into our hormonal balance. And it affects men and women a little differently.
Okay, so let's talk about the impact on women first. One thing that was really clear was how chronic stress can mess with the menstrual cycle, irregular periods or even stopping altogether.
Right. And it's important to understand that this isn't just about, you know, reproductive health, estrogen, progesterone, even testosterone.
Wait, women have testosterone.
Oh, absolutely. Just in smaller amounts than men.
Ah, interesting.
But the point is, all these hormones are crucial for so many things. They affect your hair, your skin, your mucous membranes, your brain function, your immune system. So when chronic stress throws those levels out of whack, the effects, as your sources detailed, can be really widespread.
So it's not just a women's issue, it really affects everything.
Exactly.
And it sounds like men aren't exactly off the hook either. The research you sent showed that men dealing with chronic stress often have lower testosterone levels.
Right. And it's not just about building muscles, although that definitely takes a hit. It's about the body's ability to recover, from exercise to repair tissue. And of course, there's the impact on sexual function, both desire and performance.
And one of the articles actually pointed out something about that I thought was really interesting.
Was that?
Well, it said that those medications for erectile dysfunction, the ones that help with blood flow, they often don't work when the real problem is low testosterone from stress.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
It highlights the fact that you can't just treat the symptom. You have to address the root cause. And in many cases, that root cause is hormonal imbalance.
Wow. Okay. And prolactin also seems to go up with chronic stress. And that's not good news for anyone's sex drive, it seems.
Right. And we can't forget about DHEA.
DHEA.
Yeah, sometimes it's called the youth hormone.
Okay.
But it's also a really important anticatabolic hormone.
Anticatabolic.
It means it helps prevent the breakdown of tissues. And your sources emphasized its role in testosterone production, especially for women. So chronic stress depletes DHEA, which further messes with the whole hormonal picture.
Got it. So we've got all these hormones going haywire, but it seems like cortisol is the real troublemaker here.
Oh yeah, cortisol is a big one. I mean, we all know it's the stress hormone. But your sources really dug into how its chronic release, while it's meant to help manage inflammation in the short term, actually ends up causing a whole bunch of new problems down the road. It's almost like your body is trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
It is, isn't it? In the short term, cortisol is essential. It helps regulate blood sugar, blood pressure, inflammation. But imagine if your body was constantly pumping out high levels of cortisol all the time. One of your sources compared it to taking high-dose corticosteroids every single day, like for asthma or something. It can be a lifesaver in an acute situation.
Right.
But long term, You see all kinds of side effects. High blood sugar, fluid retention, muscle wasting, joint problems. And that's basically what chronic stress does. It creates this internal environment where cortisol is constantly elevated.
So that constant flood of cortisol has a huge impact on our metabolism too, right? Like
Yeah.
elevated blood glucose seems to be a major issue.
Absolutely. And that sets off a chain reaction. One of the biggest concerns is muscle catabolism.
Muscle what now?
Catabolism.
Hmm?
It basically means your body's breaking down muscle tissue to use no energy.
Seriously, like it's eating its own muscles.
Yeah, pretty much. It's trying to get glucose
Yeah.
from wherever it can. And this is especially bad as we get older. After 35, 40. You might feel it as constant fatigue and weakness, even if you haven't been working out.
Hmm.
Your body is basically running on fumes, using your muscles for fuel because of the stress.
Wow, that's kind of depressing.
Yeah, it's not great.
Wow.
And then there's the immune system. All that cortisol also acts as an immunosuppressant. It weakens your defenses. You're more prone to getting sick. Think about it, those annoying mouth ulcers, shingles outbreaks, sore throats that just won't quit, UTIs, yeast infections. Your immune system is constantly on the back foot.
So all these systems are connected. It's not just hormones going crazy. It's also affecting our metabolism and immunity. It's all linked.
Exactly. These hormonal imbalances are just the beginning. They trigger these domino effects throughout your entire body.
Okay, so we've got this hormonal chaos, which then leads to metabolic issues. And one thing your research really challenged was this idea that metabolic syndrome is just about diet and exercise.
It's so much more than that. While those things definitely play a role, your sources were very clear that we can't ignore emotional well-being, sleep quality, managing stress levels. Even things like overtraining can contribute. So even if you think you're doing everything right, if you're chronically stressed, you can still be headed for trouble.
So even with a good diet and exercise, stress can still mess things up. That's a little discouraging.
It can be, but it's also empowering to know what's really going on.
Yep.
Because then you can start to address it. Remember, cortisol breaks down protein, and that includes muscle tissue. So chronic stress leads to muscle loss, which, here's the kicker, lowers your basal metabolic rate.
Meaning?
You burn fewer calories at rest. So even if you haven't changed your eating habits, you're more likely to gain weight. It's like a double whammy.
Ugh, that's frustrating. And what about insulin resistance? How does stress tie into that?
Well, when your body can't store glucose in your muscles effectively because of stress and all these hormonal shifts, your pancreas has to work overtime. It's pumping out more and more insulin, trying to force the glucose into the cells.
Yeah.
But eventually your cells become resistant to insulin. That's insulin resistance. And you end up with high levels of insulin in your blood, hyperinsulinemia.
Okay, so the glucose can't get into the muscles, then what?
Instead of being stored as energy, it gets shunted towards fat storage. And not just any fat, but visceral fat. That's the deep belly fat that surrounds your organs. It's the kind of fat that's really linked to health problems.
Ah, the dreaded belly fat. I bet a lot of people are relating to that.
Probably.
Hmm.
And your sources were pretty clear. Chronic stress is a big contributor to this type of fat accumulation.
So what are some signs that this is happening? What should we be looking out for?
Well, your sources listed several key indicators. High blood sugar, unhealthy cholesterol levels, high blood pressure, increased blood clotting, high uric acid, fatty liver. All of these are red flags that your metabolism is out of whack. And it increases your risk for all sorts of serious problems down the line.
It's like a domino effect. Stress leads to hormones going crazy, then metabolic issues, and then all these other health problems. One of the sources even talked about how people get so confused about what to eat when they're dealing with this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's totally understandable to feel that way. When you lose muscle mass because of stress, your body actually needs fewer calories.
Yeah.
So you might be eating what you always have, but it's now too much because your metabolism has slowed down.
That's so frustrating.
It is. And here's another thing that might surprise you. Going overboard with cardio. When you're already stressed, can actually backfire.
Wait, really? But exercise is good for you.
It is in the right context. But when your body is already pumping out cortisol and breaking down tissue, intense cardio just adds fuel to the fire. It can actually worsen muscle loss.
Wow. Okay, so we've got the hormonal roller coaster, the metabolic mayhem, and now there's this thing called chronic low-grade inflammation. What exactly is that?
Well, it's kind of like it sounds. It's this persistent low-level inflammation throughout your body. It's not like the acute inflammation you get from an injury or infection. It's more of a simmering underlying imbalance. and chronic stress, along with all the metabolic issues we talked about, creates the perfect environment for this to flourish.
So, what causes this simmering? Are there specific things driving it?
Yes, there are, and your sources mention these pro-inflammatory signaling molecules called cytokines.
Other kinds.
Things
Okay.
like interleukin-1b, interferon, TNF-alpha, CRP, ferritin. These are all markers of inflammation in the body.
So, it's not just one thing, it's a whole bunch of factors.
Exactly. It's the hormonal imbalances, the metabolic dysfunction,
Hmm.
the visceral fat, the loss of muscle, poor sleep, high cortisol. It all contributes. And here's the thing. You don't have to be overweight to have this.
Really?
Yeah, even thin people can develop visceral fat if they're chronically stressed. And that drives inflammation. In fact, your sources even talked about how this is seen in some ultra-endurance athletes. So it's not just about body weight, it's about this underlying imbalance.
That's really interesting. So, what kind of problems does this chronic inflammation cause?
Well, it can affect pretty much everything. Your sources mention muscle pain, joint issues, all sorts of digestive problems,
Mhm.
leaky gut, IBS, you name it. And it's linked to chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, multiple chemical sensitivities, even allergies. It's really widespread.
And it affects the brain too, right? This thing called neuroinflammation.
Absolutely. Those inflammatory cytokines can actually cross the blood-brain barrier and cause inflammation in your brain.
That can't be good.
It's not. It can really impair your cognitive function.
Hmm.
That brain fog feeling, difficulty concentrating, problems of memory. It's all connected to neuroinflammation.
And your research even linked it to mood disorders like depression.
Yes. You see neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, all those chemicals that regulate our mood, they get thrown out of balance by chronic inflammation and stress.
Wow. And one of the things that really resonated with me from your sources was the discussion about the emotional toll of all this, that feeling of shame, the isolation that comes with chronic fatigue, just wanting to rest but feeling guilty about it.
It's a heavy burden to carry. And unfortunately, it can lead to a vicious cycle. People end up relying on medication, antidepressants, anxiety meds, muscle relaxants, even corticosteroids,
Mhm.
just to manage the symptoms. And while those meds have their place, the research you sent was very clear. You have to address the underlying stress if you want to truly heal.
Okay, so we've painted a pretty bleak picture here. Hormones out of whack, metabolism struggling, widespread inflammation. But luckily, your sources also offered some solutions, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot you can do to take back control. And the best part is, even small changes can make a big difference. Your sources really emphasize that. It's about finding what works for you and building a sustainable routine.
So where do we start?
Well, let's start with the morning routine. One of the key recommendations was waking up at a consistent time and getting in 35-45 minutes of low-intensity movement, like walking, ideally before you eat anything to help keep your blood sugar stable.
So fasted walking in the morning?
Right. It aligns with the concept of intermittent fasting, giving your digestive system a break. Plus, that early morning walk can help regulate your cortisol and adrenaline throughout the day. And getting some sunlight first thing in the morning helps reset your body's internal clock, which is really important for sleep.
So it's not just about the exercise itself, it's about sending the right signals to your body.
Exactly.
What about diet? What are some good dietary strategies?
Well, your sources generally recommended a lower carb approach, at least to start, especially if you're struggling with high cortisol and insulin resistance.
So cut back on the carbs.
But they weren't saying to go full keto. They emphasized the importance of timing your carbs, having them around your workouts to fuel your activity and help with muscle recovery. The idea is to minimize digestive inflammation, which can be a problem when you're stressed.
So it's about being strategic, not necessarily about eliminating carbs completely.
Exactly.
Okay, and what about exercise? Aside from that morning walk, what did the sources recommend?
They really stressed finding balance and avoiding overtraining,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're dealing with neuroinflammation, depression, metabolic issues. Pushing yourself too hard can actually make things worse. They suggested focusing on walking most days and then incorporating 2 days of higher intensity, strength training, like a hybrid approach, or CrossFit-style workouts.
So consistency is key, but don't overdo it. And getting back to those biological rhythms seems like that's really important too.
Oh, it's crucial. Your sources were adamant about aligning your life with the natural light-dark cycle, consistent sleep schedule, no late-night meals, limiting screen time before bed. All of that helps regulate your circadian rhythm, which is essential for good sleep.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's talk about some of those other tools your sources mentioned, like adaptogens.
Ah, yes. Adaptogens are really fascinating. They're natural substances that help your body cope with stress. Your sources mentioned ashwagandha, rhodiola, maca, bacopa. They all have different benefits, but they basically help your nervous system and adrenal glands handle stress better. One of your sources even talked about a specific product that combines adaptogens with glycine and magnesium. It's designed to support your stress response without making you feel emotionally numb.
And speaking of magnesium, that seemed to be a big one too.
Oh, magnesium is so important, especially for a stressed out nervous system and for neuroinflammation. Certain forms, like magnesium acetyltaurinate and magnesium L-threonate, are thought to be better at getting into the brain, which is where you need it.
So it's not all magnesium is created equal.
Right. Different forms have different benefits. And then there's berberine.
Taurine.
Yeah, it's a natural compound that can help with metabolic syndrome like high blood sugar and uric acid. It's been shown to improve insulin sensitivity, which is really helpful for managing the metabolic imbalances that come with chronic stress.
Okay, so we've got a whole toolbox of strategies here, but your sources also made a point of knowing when to seek professional help.
Absolutely. If you're over 35 or 45 and you're still struggling despite making lifestyle changes.
It might be time to talk to a doctor about hormone imbalances.
Yeah, they highlighted specific situations like women with low DHEA or going through menopause, and men with low libido and energy, even when they're living a healthy lifestyle. Sometimes you need a medical professional to help get things back on track.
So it's about knowing when lifestyle changes aren't enough.
Exactly.
And finally, your sources really emphasize the importance of patience.
Oh, patience is key. This isn't about quick fixes. Chronic stress takes time to develop, and it takes time to undo the damage. You might see some initial improvements, but then things can plateau or even backslide around the 2 to 3 month mark.
So it's a journey, not a sprint.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it requires consistency, resilience, and trust in the process.
So the main takeaway is, even though chronic stress is a huge problem, you're not powerless. There are things you can do to feel better.
Exactly. We hope this deep dive has given you a sense of clarity and empowerment. It's about moving from fear and overwhelm to a place of proactive engagement with your health.
And then remember, there are resources out there to help you, whether it's healthcare professionals or information and support groups. You don't have to go through this alone.
Take charge of your health, rediscover your inner resilience, and learn to navigate the stresses of life with more confidence and control.
It's about taking that first step and then the next toward a healthier and happier life.